It is 9:20. It is the 19th day of November 2020, and I am the humbug in the bar. The man with no fan, the face with no trace. I went from 220 subs to 217 subs, so I lost 3 subs. I don't mind if you leave and unsub, but just let me know why. You know, if you're going to unsub, let me know why. Because I can't fix what's broken if you don't tell me what's broken. So stop being petty. If you don't like my content, comment down below, then where I can know why you unsubbed and fix the problem. Otherwise, if you're unsubbing just because I upset you, well, you knew I was going to upset you going in. That's the whole point of this vlog. Anyways, it's time for another GM tip, because we always need to throw out a GM tip every now and then. With the long, cold months coming up, we're going to be in another COVID whatever about to hit us. We're going to be locked inside wanting to game. So, good time for another GM tip. All right, so lore in a game is so important. And especially if you're creating your own world as opposed to using a pre-published world like the Forgotten Realms or Century City or whatever, you know, depending on what genre. But, you know, I'm assuming most of you do D&D, because let's face it. So it's very important to create a story for your world. Now, the story doesn't have to be huge, as I've said hundreds and hundreds of times. Starting small is the best way, because if you start small, then the story can develop with the player characters as they explore the world, and you can sort of get a feeling of, from your audience, where they want to go, what stories they want to tell, and then you won't be angry or disappointed if you went to all this trouble creating something that you really, really love, only to discover the players have absolutely no interest in that and want to do something else. So starting small is very important, and having that lore be small is very important, because one thing I have seen time and time again, especially recently, is when a creator creates a lot of lore and then just assumes his audience knows what he's talking about. And it doesn't matter if you're writing a book, a movie, a comic book, a video game, a short story, or in a case of ours, a role-playing game. It is always wrong to assume your audience knows what you're talking about. So if you say something like, well, you see 15 Flurgabargs, and because the audience has no idea of the amount that you've spent 8 days writing up the lore and passionate artwork and stuff of the Flurgabargs, and then they're like, I don't know what is that? I don't know what that is. You're just saying words. What does 15 Flurgabargs mean? So, you know, it's okay to have lore. It's okay to have in-depth, well-written, passionate lore, but never assume your audience knows what you're talking about, because they don't. You need to, if you're going to have lore, let them know what the lore is, and don't just refer to things because you think it's cool. Like, I recently played a game where, like, for 2 or 3 games, the DM was making references to a story and stuff that he knew and stuff that he'd built into the world and stuff that he thought was clever. But the fact was, nobody else at the table knew what he was talking about. So he kept making references and you know, pop references and cultural references and references to this thing, and assuming that everybody else at the table had read this thing and understood what he was talking about, when the fact was nobody else knew what he was talking about. So while he's all like, oh, yeah, I'm so cool for putting this in, and look at them, the rest of us are like, what? I don't know what he's referring to. What does that mean? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? What is this thing that he's talking about? I don't know. And then, inevitably, one of the many reasons why his game fell apart is because he didn't know what the player character base wanted. He was telling this story with all this lore and all these references to this history that he had created in his mind, but he didn't ever share that lore or that history with anybody else. So while everybody else just kind of wanted to run just sort of, hey, I just kind of want to do a normal go in the dungeon D&D campaign. I don't really care. You know, this is 5e. We're not really going to invest that much energy. So, you know, he's like throwing all this lore out and all these stories out, and the rest of the audience is like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't care. Why is this important? Like, we spent 3 or 4 games dealing with this one subject, and at no point in time did he ever actually make it known why this topic was so important, and why we had to do this was just sort of us fumbling around, and then he couldn't understand why none of us were upset or getting scared or like investing in this. It is because, well, you haven't told us why we need to invest in it. You haven't told us why we should be scared. You haven't told us why we should worry. You just throw this thing at us without any reference, and then you expect us to respond as if we are invested, but we don't know what you're talking about. It's like coming in to the middle of Empire without ever seeing Star Wars and missing the first half an hour, 45 minutes of Empire, and then never seeing Jedi and having no idea who these people are, and suddenly they're talking about, you know, we got to go to Mos Eisley's and rescue Princess Sandwich from the evil Jabba the Pizza, and you're like, who is the Empire? What is Princess Pizza? Why is Jabba the Sandwich? I've never seen the first movie. I'm halfway in the second movie. I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm not a fan of this story. Who is this person? Why should I care? It's the same thing. So if you're going to have lore and history, have it small, and make sure don't assume we know what you're talking about, because we didn't. And part of the reason that game fell apart is because this individual had created this incredible lore and history and backstory and politics, and was referring to pop culture references only they knew, and the rest of the audience is like, A, I don't want to play this game. I just want to play a normal D&D game. B, I don't have any fucking clue what you're talking about. So why should this be important to me if I have no investment in this? So yeah, you're going to have lore, and you're going to have backstory, and you're going to have history. Don't, make it a small lore, make it a small backstory, make it a small history, make it a small world to start with, and then create the lore with the player characters. Don't invest a lot of lore and hundreds of pages of history and then not tell it to them, and then get upset when they don't know what you're talking about. Always assume your audience has no idea what you're talking about. Thank you very much. If you appreciate this content, comment down below. If you don't appreciate this content and want to unsubscribe, comment down below and let me know why you don't appreciate it and why you're unsubscribing, because otherwise it does me no good. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is a good time. Help me hit 300 subs by the end of the year. I will talk to you later.